In this video I want to talk about stick floats. They're one of my favourite sorts of floats. I very much like waggler fishing, but I also like fishing a stick float, especially in summer with hempen tears, and they're a float I've used for close on 50 years. Stick floats go back a lot further than that. It's said that Benny Ashurst started using them sometime maybe in the 40s and 50s on the canals in Lancashire. And it started off as a float that he could fish across the fairly narrow canals, a float with a small balsa body and a heavier stem made from a hardwood that possibly came from spindles in the cotton factories. That hardwood changed into heavy cane, the sort that you see as green sticks in garden stores, and the stick float was born. Those early floats took a BB and a number 8. The number 8 was there to anchor the bait on the bottom because the caster was fished over depth, and the BB went under the float. Sometimes they'd change the shot into fish on the drop. When the Trent, which was artificially warmed in the late 50s and early 60s, had prolific roach shoals, fish about 5 or 6 to the pound, Benny and some of his mates, including his son Kevin, went to the Trent and basically plundered the shoals of roach. They were catching on the drop because of the warmth of the water. The fish were up in the water, and they really slaughtered the roach at times. The local Nottingham anglers at that time used much heavier balsa floats, porcupine quills with bulk shot. But Benny and Kevin had it all their own way for a while. But others like Ivan Marks soon started to catch on. The float became very popular. Billy Lane thought it was too popular. People misused the float, tried to use it for things that it wasn't really designed to do. And he often thought that people should use heavier floats, but he still used stick floats as well himself. As time went on, different anglers put their names to floats. I've got early Kevin and Benny Ashurst and Ivan Marks floats made with heavy cane and balsa. The next angler, similar time to put their name to a float, was Pete Warren, a Nottingham angler who developed a method of fishing casters just beyond his rod tip in the early 70s when he was close to being unbeatable. But other anglers were soon coming after him as the 70s wore on. People like John Allerton, John Dean, and there were other very good stick float anglers, and they also put their name to different floats. That's more or less an original type float that I made myself. It's just got cane and balsa. That's a commercial production model of a Pete Warren float. It's got a dome tip to it, and that holds up in the more boily water. A similar float is the John Dean. This is the commercial version with a plastic stem. John Dean found that plastic paintbrushes, as used by children, had a tapered plastic stem that was fairly dense, denser than cane, but not too dense. And he used those to make his own floats. And of course, when it was commercial, the bases were moulded from a consistent plastic. And very, very good floats. They cast incredibly well, and they go through the water just right. And later there were other versions of heavier floats like this one. This is a Drennan one with a clear plastic stem, very heavy stem in this case, and I think it's a little bit too heavy. The other type of heavy stem float is a lignum one. This is a Dick Clegg lignum stem float, and again they're to give it casting weight, so they will cast even further than the plastic stem floats, maybe up to 6 rod lengths, which is about 24-25 yards out, sort of maximum catapult range with maggots and casters. I've got a little bit of fishing to show you, fishing with a stick float. Keep it fairly simple. I've long liked open face reels, which is the original reel for fishing stick floats by Benny and Kevin Ashurst and Ivan Marks. At times they did favour close face reels like the original Abu 505 and then the 506. Some anglers think that stick floats should be fished with centre pins. You can fish them with centre pins. I don't like it. I think they hold them back too much. These are light floats. They take up to maybe 6 or 7 number 4. That's not very much. Not enough to pull off a line off a centre pin at times, unless the current's absolutely right. But it's up to each individual. I'm going to show you some windy conditions and how to try and overcome that. The basic shotting for a stick float is fairly simple. You basically string out small shot. I'm fishing on the Stour today with a classic stick float setup with shirt button shotting. That's shot spread out, number 6s with a number 8 near the hook. It's important to just cast in nice and smoothly and to feed every cast. And sometimes if you're playing a big fish, remember to feed while you're playing the fish. If it's going to take a little while, say a bigger chub or something like that, you can feed 2 or 3 times while you're playing the fish. That takes a bit of getting used to. You need to be calm and collected when you do it. This second session shows a much more windy bit of water. The wind's blowing straight down the river and I've waded out on a hard gravel shelf. It's so hard that on the inside there seems to be concrete set into the riverbed, so I can't get the bank stick of my bait stand, having forgotten my bait apron, into the gravel, so it's actually further out from me, so it's a bit awkward. The wind's very gusty and the water's dropping off from a foot or so down into about 5 feet of water over gravel. There's plenty of roach and dace down there. There's also a pike which catches a couple of the fish. Having to mend the line almost constantly, and the line is blowing up off the river at times. The line's Dave Harrell line. I think this is the float line on here, which floats quite well, so it's not sinking. Once again, I'm feeding every cast, and because it's fairly slow underneath the surface, I'm feeding down towards the float. This diagram quickly shows that by putting a shot above the float, it will hold the line down a bit in downstream winds, something I didn't do on this day, but it might have helped a bit. I hope you've enjoyed this short video. Stick float fishing is simple. Just keep practicing, find different bits of river to try it out on, and enjoy catching those dace, roach and chub.